Hi, it's Matt Theobald, founder of Internous.com, Internous.com, the database of databases, which is kind of governed by the Internet Search Environment Number, is like an ISBN number for books, except it's for databases or search environments. And a search environment could be any structured set of information with its own algorithm, like a database, a library catalog, a P2P environment, a blog search, any kind of searchable environment. So a search environment is one of these types of things, and the search environment is all of them in concert. So what we attempt to do is to identify each one, catalog and classify it, and make it searchable, and create, therefore, a database of databases. What I'm most passionate about is connecting people's minds with the body of knowledge, and the body of knowledge would be this search environment and the many search environments that are on the internet, and the human mind. So a cognitive interface between minds and databases. So if you think of social networks as being interactions between communities of individuals with minds that are in some way very sophisticated databases, exabytes of information. And then you've got large databases and small databases, which could be in some cases maybe exabytes, or eventually definitely exabytes of information, terabytes of information, or just kilobytes of information. And connecting the databases that are of interest and that inform and reward the knowledge that people desire, to help them make decisions that improve their lives and their communities. Being asked what I would want people to know, think, feel, or do. And what I want people to know is that there's a deep, hidden, darker, invisible, and structured web of information that's in databases that is vastly larger than any contemporary search engine, and it exists right now. The current search engines index the surface web, which is purportedly, by best statistics, 0.2% of the information that's available on the internet. So Google and Yahoo and the rest only skim the surface of the surface. What I want you to think about is the number of databases that are out there that are not, the content is not indexed by any of the contemporary search engines. There could be several hundred in your community. There could be several hundreds of thousands in your state. There are definitely millions in the U.S. and there are probably tens of millions around the world. When you think of URLs in Google, for example, passing the trillion URL mark, what we're talking about is about 10 million URLs that are database interfaces that contain 500 to 650 times the amount of information that's on Google or Yahoo. What I want you to feel is the depth of knowledge that's already out there, that it's hidden in the sense, but it's already there. I mean, you can find these things through Google by adding the word database to your search, but still that's not going to be that accurate because the word database has to be on the page that you're searching to find it. So I want you to feel empowered by this knowledge that no brand of search utility has a total grasp, no near a total grasp of the amount of data, the amount of information that's out there on the internet right now. What I want you to do is I want you to consider the information at Internous.com on the blog and on the website, and think about it. Some of it's kind of obtuse and future-oriented and kind of vague, intentionally vague. That will become more clear, and as it becomes more clear, what we'll be ready to do is to ask you to find the databases that are of interest to you, begin bookmarking them, and then once we're ready to start cataloging, you could contribute those as suggestions for the overall collection to share with people who have similar communities of interest and communities of purpose. For the future, the future's already here in a lot of ways, in the sense that social networks have brought and humanized technology a lot more, and I think there's been a separation between computer culture or technical culture and techies and the rest of the world. And as people who in the rest of the world have become more technical, the technical people have to also become more human. And I think that gap is closing faster and faster. And in a generation from now, it may be accomplished. But I think the task for information literacy, for people that are less literate, regardless of age or generation, as far as information literacy goes, is the most important issue, to be able to sort out where your information is coming from what's important from the task you're trying to do, and be able to sort out the vast amount of information that's coming onto the network. So as there's more and more information coming onto the network, and there's more and more people coming onto the network, it presents a problem, but it also is more of a solution than it is a problem. So I have a very bright view of how technology will be humanized, and humans will be, technologicalized, or whatever. I don't know the best way to put it, but it's a synthesis between the real world and the cyber world, and how the cyber world is just a tool to enhance reality, and reality is much more important than sitting in front of a computer screen. And sitting in front of a computer screen is going to be, things are going to be more mobile, they're going to be more transparent, there's going to be enhanced data access from a visual point of view, just from wearable computing, and access to technologies to enhance your mobile existence in the real world. So I think that as usability becomes more practiced and more embedded in devices and interfaces, these kind of cognitive interfaces that I was talking about before, that cognitive enhancement or cognitive augmentation will occur in the internet user widely and rapidly. Well, the idea first came in August of 1996 at the end of graduate school in a standards workshop, where my professor, Carol Hertz, said that standards were very important, they're very powerful, and they were very valuable financially. So I thought I should come up with a standard. And and as I described before, I kind of combined the ISBN and DNS idea and assigned it to search engines, and this was born the International Search Engine Serial Number, or ISEN number, replacing the SE for the B and the S in the BS in ISBN and ISSN. So I went to Rick Worley, who was a webmaster at IUPUI and at IHETS, working on the early job site Online Career Center, which became Monster.com. The first job site on the internet, started by Bill Warren. He was like, why don't you just call it, it's the ISBN and the ISSN, why don't you just call it the ISEN number? And I was like, well, that's a better idea. So Rick and I have been dialoguing about this concept of cataloging databases and registering them like web pages, like a DNS registry, since 1996. Rick went on to spend 12 years at Monster as vice president, and in the last half of that career there, he was the vice president for analytics and traffic monitoring, as well as commoditization and monetization of basically resume content, the descriptive content about a human being, an individual, which is not that far off of an idea from a descriptive resume about a database. So we've always talked about connecting the mind to the body of knowledge, that if you look at somebody's resume, you might be able to glean what kind of databases they're wanting to look at and be able to map that professional interest to resources that fit that professional need. So Rick has been involved since then. In 1990, when I graduated in 1996, I took a job working for the National Information Consortium, which is a parent company of several companies, including Indiana Interactive, which at the time and still runs the IN.gov Access Indiana. I was involved in registering the IN.gov domain, and was the third non-federal .com domain to my knowledge. After New York and the state of Massachusetts, Indiana was third. The first job I had at Access Indiana was to organize all 92 counties into a template system that would offer a template web page to every county in the state. Since they didn't have web servers, they'd be able to dial in and add information to this template. And then eventually, as they got web servers, they would migrate that template off of our site and turn it into their own thing. So we started off as a template system to guide them along. It unified, you could search each county in the state of Indiana with the same subject category, so you could know where you were no matter what county you were in. But once the counties took them over, they kind of made them into their own nomenclatures, and that cohesiveness was lost, but independence was gained. And at the time, California, I think, had 38 out of 52 counties with websites, and Indiana had 92 out of 92, and it was the first state in the country to have a full web presence for each county. I ran out of work to do there and decided to offer to redesign the state homepage, and was able to get a graphic designer and a programmer, and about 3 months to do it. At the time, we had about 80,000 pages of static information, but some very basic principles like alphabetization of departmental agencies, proper alphabetization, which I think requires a master's in library science, actually, or some library experience. Education, Department of Education, being able to index things very simply, provided different ways for people to get the same information very, very easily. That design was approved very quickly and went up and lasted in a very static way, non-dynamically delivered HTML, just static HTML, for about 3 years without changing. After we completed the Indiana project, I was asked to move to Iowa to start the Iowa Access project, and they already had a website, but out of 40, 50 agencies, they knew where about 12 URLs were, and they were the big agencies: Department of Transportation, Department of Education, and each agency had been given a sum of money to start their own web presence, but there was no overarching governing of the of standards for what government web pages should look like. And my job was, as the information architect for the Citizens Information Network, was to create a single portal to all state government information. Well, the challenge is that out of the 40, 50, 60 agencies, we had 12 URLs. So I started to develop a community of webmasters, and the ones that showed up were the ones that we already had. And meetings weren't working. Trying to hunt people down wasn't working. Nobody seemed to know who the webmaster was, where the web page was, but there was suspect that there was one out there. And eventually just kind of relied on divine intervention. I sent a letter to the woman who was the head of the government side of the Iowa Access Project, and she was able to get the governor to mandate a declaration of some sort that said that if you own a website in the Iowa state government enterprise, then you're required to report it to Matt Theobald by Friday, or you will not be included in the state homepage. Now, that wasn't true. If they sent it a day later or a week later, we'd still put it in there. We just gave them a deadline and said that, you're not going to be included in the state homepage if you don't tell us where you are. And got the majority of the URLs and was able to do the alphabetization and the basic subject stuff, and in just a matter of hours put together the website that took 6 months of searching, and that divine intervention was really the key that helped. The day after the bioaccess project was approved, I was also out of work again, and moved back to Indiana to work for the Indiana Higher Education Telecommunications System, where Rick Worley had just left to go to Monster for full time. I took Rick's old position, and as the head of the Network Information Center or Web Development Group, serving all the colleges and universities, state government agencies as far as the backbone or the network architecture, network infrastructure for the Access Indiana state backbone. Previously, I'd been involved with the county stuff and the Access Indiana Information Network, which was the website, but this was more the guts of the routers and the network nodes, and it was growing rapidly from 81 colleges, universities, and then being expanded to all the public libraries, all the public K through 12s, prisons, police stations, DOT hubs, every public building in the state of Indiana. And so I was working on doing a lot of quickly we had 3 small websites that I helped re-architect and then kind of passed on to interns to change the content, and then got into knowledge management, which is where the trouble started. I learned a lot about rumor tracking and verification and kind of water cooler, information gathering, and then quickly kind of became frustrated about being so deeply embedded in every aspect of office politics that I had the opportunity to move on and start my own company and start to work on ISEN full-time. And that was 2001. Formed the company in 2002. Was pulling together all my documentation for about a year and a half, and there was a group I had come across through a conference I went through that IHETS had paid for, called NCOS. It was the Network Knowledge Organization Systems and Services group, and it was a group of people that deal with building thesauri and subject classification systems, from everything from the Getty Art thesaurus to the military and geographic information systems, and just really a wide variety of ways of organizing knowledge. I didn't meet Paul back then, but I put a request for a consultant out on the NCOS list, and 3 candidates emerged, all of which were PhDs and all of which were consulting. All of them had been in and out of academic, corporate, or government work, but Paul stood out. Plus, he was from Hanover, New Hampshire, which is where Hanover College, my alma mater, was from. So a special connection there. Kind of serendipitous choice, but Paul's credentials were what stood out. And brought him to Indianapolis for 5 days as a consultant to hone up my documentation, to make sure that what I was saying was said in the proper language, was properly cited, that I was not just making things up, or was needed to nail it down as an academic cited and vetted document. And that resulted in a technical plan that was passed to an attorney. The attorney put it into patentese, so it was another version. Paul is the co-author on the patent, and that started. We filed the patent in November of 2004, the provisional. Then we filed the actual patent application in November 2005. It was published in July of 2006 and has been pending since. And we understand it's a 7-year process. The internet patents are especially scrutinized, and you almost need a new wing of the patent office to do that. So Paul and Rick, Paul is the artificial intelligence, information retrieval, and search person, and Rick Worley is really the expert on monitoring traffic and commoditizing it, and analyzing traffic patterns and user behavior. So those are the three core people. A friend I met at IHETS, Mark Alsop, who was a programmer who developed the database of network nodes, had already developed a database that kind of quasi-cataloged, what the IP address of every node was, where the location physically was in each building, the directions on how to get to the router, who had installed it. This was just building and reinforcing, the idea of ISEN being a database of databases, and talked a lot about ISEN at IHETS, but it wasn't really ready for prime time, and I really wasn't ready to just give it away because it was a prior to engaging with both Nick and NIC and IHETS prior to that, so I was still pretty protective of it, but I was talking about metadata a lot. They used to call me MetaMat. There was during the time I was at IHETS, I hung out at a coffee shop that was the closest thing I could find in Indianapolis to something you might find in Manhattan or San Francisco or New Orleans or somewhere, and it was occupied by goths and hippies and techies and ballerinas and all kinds of different people, and there was a group of computer enthusiasts that were meeting there one night, and I had met the one guy before, and I said, well, what? He goes, well, do you want to talk about your ISEN thing? And I was like, sure. So I got in front of about 10 guys. And one of them had a briefcase that he carved out and put a laptop into that was, built his own portable computer and was showing it off. And this was around 2001. And met Garrett Honeycutt. And turned out this group was called 2600. And 2600, the Hacker Quarterly, you'll find on magazine racks. And I was using 2600 to recruit for IHETS, because IHETS was kind of famous for hiring people who had been kind of rogue, white hat, gray hat kind of guys in the university environment. So I thought it was a fertile ground for recruitment. Had an interesting conversation years later about how I knew Garrett and why I knew Garrett, because of the 2600 connection. But I guess that's been cleared. So Garrett is a real systems wonk, and I've known him since about 17. So he's probably about 28 now, and has traveled the U.S. and done a lot of great work in the systems environment. So he's kind of our systems administrator. Mark Alsop, the fellow I mentioned who did the database of network nodes, is really our chief programmer. Rick Rowley is our chief analytics officer. Paul Thompson is our chief technology officer. I'm currently chief executive officer, though I hope to find a new CEO and step down to CXO or chief variable officer, so I can have my hands in everything. But right now we're all chiefs and no Indians, and if there are Indians, the natives, the indigenous peoples of the internet, the early pioneers, they're the librarians that we need. So that's what we're searching for, as a new tribe and a way to bring together the pioneers that I've found and continue on with the pioneering culture. In 1992, when I finished my undergraduate degree in history at Hanover College, I was really thinking about what would be the next television or what would be the next railroad, and I was fortunate enough to enter graduate school at the dawn of the release of the World Wide Web, where I learned HTML early and the fundamentals of domain name system and internet fundamentals technologies that haven't really changed. The library science degree afforded me a knowledge of not just how things are organized, but how things are disorganized, and more importantly, how they're disorganized, in order to make some order out of them, but also respect the serendipity of kind of chaos and organizing information in a natural way. So looking at the history of of library science, the history of standards. I was thinking about the Dewey Decimal System and the ISBN number, which came much later. It's only about 40 years old. And then the DNS system, which is, came, after, the dawn of the internet. And combined the ISBN and DNS systems, and then, thought again about classification systems and more modern things than, something as kind of antique as the Dewey system, which is still relevant for many communities and some resources. But looking toward what the past and the way the information was organized in the past and respecting that, looking at the present and the exciting kind of developments and growth of the World Wide Web and the internet, and then taking a strong look at the future and not being held back by the past or held back by the present, but really thinking of things in a quantum way, as much as is humanly possible, and trying to get my head around that. And I really arrived at databases as being the new medium. The ISBN is for books, ISSN is for magazines, and the new medium is really the database. And there was no standard, or is no standard, for organizing databases. And it's kind of a combination of a full cycle of a study of history, the theory of history, the theory of interpreting history in different ways, in order to achieve a knowledge of the present, as well as the kind of anticipate or to create the future. The areas of research that I'm most interested in are in artificial intelligence and in cognitive aspects of interface development. I think that our group and our company have a firm grasp of how to catalog the databases so they can be accessed by many different points of view. What I'm next most interested in, as far as R&D on the horizon, is how to create these cognitive enhancements and cognitive augmentation to get the interface more immediately guiding the user effortlessly through, or not effortlessly, but with some effort toward the solutions they're looking for, and help them explore questions to the questions that come out of the answers that they are already finding. So the kind of question answering research, learning a lot about what Paul Thompson knows about, really. I mean, Paul published an article several years back in 2004, I think, about cognitive hacking, which was really about how the interface can be changed to deceive someone without them knowing it, to enter in a credit card number or a social security number, or to fake a news story in order to alter reality in some way, or make the user do something in reality as a reaction to something the interface is showing them. And I think the counter to that is these kind of cognitive augmentation or cognitive enhancement, where you could actually kind of fool the user into doing things that are beneficial, that make it easier to find difficult things, or to cause them to do something that's going to have a more proactive or more beneficial aspect. So kind of the counter intelligence to the counterintelligence of cognitive hacking. It's a very meta kind of idea. I think continued research in metadata schemas and metadata descriptive development is important to me. And maybe thirdly, community outreach in the real world by information professionals that would be connected to our company and our idea, whether it be librarians or information professionals or business analysts or a variety of different information professionals that would be using the system, and how they're integrating it into their work life, and that connects back to the cognitive enhancement idea, of being able to serve the public not just data, but an interface that is constantly adapting to new challenges and new needs. I would like to be more closely connected to Tim Berners-Lee, Barack Obama, and maybe something like Malcolm Gladwell. I think we focus most of our attention, developing relationships with experts in various aspects of the technologies that ISEN touches on, and we've done a strong job at getting understanding and buy-in initially toward eventual adoption. But more important than an official standard adoption of the ISEN technology would be, which would be a de jure standard, would be a de facto standard, where people really realize that they need to register their database, or they need to register their friend's database, or they need to help us organize this knowledge so that everyone can have access to it. I'm often asked this, what do you want, just a de jure or a de facto standard? And I say, well, why not a little bit of both? Why not an official standard? And why not push an official standard that already has a user base and an application running? So. Well, the next enterprise opportunity is really the narrowing down of the kind of global total information cataloging of all the databases to one very specific area of urgent need, which is human health and life sciences. It's a very hot area. It's a very competitive area, but it's clear that with more and more medical records databases from hospitals to small doctors' offices emerging, there's going to be a need to connect those with a very robust security and privacy considerations or requirements, rather. But also, we've been encouraged to look at things that are also related to very urgent things like homeland security, which could be tied to health and a wide variety of other, transportation and such. But right now we kind of have blinders that are open to a global view on the life sciences, which would include biology, bioinformatics, and databases about human health. ISEN is designed to be a long-term, scope kind of a standard. The ISBN number has been around since 1971 and has lasted 40 years plus. Just 40 years. ISSN followed shortly after. Now, Dewey Decimal System came around in the late 19th century and is a Victorian view of the way information should be organized, but is still very applicable and robust in some communities. So ISEN is designed to be as permanent as it deserves to be. If an emerging technology comes out that there's something other than a database, I mean, we kind of talked about earlier how you have the book, the serial publication, and the database being the new kind of media, even though databases have been around, probably since the 60s, late 50s maybe. But it's only as valid as it deserves to be, and if something comes along and needs to replace it, then it would need to be replaced. My technology team is comprised of Paul Thompson, who's the Chief Technology Officer. His expertise is in information retrieval, otherwise known as search, artificial intelligence, and legal informatics, but has expanded in genetics and life sciences, applications, as well as intelligence community work. Rick Worley, who's the Chief Analytics Officer, who's involved in measurement of traffic usage and monitoring traffic, commoditizing or monetizing traffic where it's applicable. And the Chief Programmer would be Mark Alsop, who is a coder, builds things. Garrett Honeycutt, who is the kind of chief systems guy. He is builds the database, keeps the servers running, provides security, and kind of houses the technology. And then myself, I'm the chief variable officer, standing in as interim CEO, where I kind of have my hand in everything. And am getting better at making decisions about how to pull the team together in order to get the software actually built and running. When I'm getting ready to talk about ISEN with someone, I always ask them what their subject domain of interest is professionally, whether they're, are you an academic, are you government, are you corporate, are you, does your job title mean anything, does it point to something or other that and then use that content around that job, be it insurance or education to kind of use a specific example of education databases and how they can be organized according to educational standards, from K through 12. This would be databases appropriate through kindergartners, this would be databases appropriate for, K through life types, standardization, breakdown, and the same is true as always the breakdowns of professional levels of informedness, I suppose. And then after that, I've been told it's kind of like a conversational whiplash. I tend to hit them with the idea of the database of databases, and if the database goes off, or if their light bulb goes off, or it goes dim, I try to adjust it there. But I believe that I'm pretty transparent. I don't drill down into enough detail that somebody could do exactly what we're doing, but as far as the concept of what we are doing, I think it's pretty clear from the interview here that I'm giving away a lot of big picture stuff, but the internal machinations of how we're doing it are 12, 13 year development. So it would be hard to do that. My rule about repeating things is if you repeat things that aren't meant to be repeated, you stop hearing things. So you need to be clear if a piece of information that's really good, whether it's worth repeating at the time or who's worth repeating to, and be very respectful of the person who's telling you the information, even if it's about ISEN and it's my right to talk about as much about ISEN as I want to. If my team member says, hey, here's an idea, hey man, don't talk about it, because they know I will if they don't tell me not to. Or I'll try to be on the lookout to say, okay, you want me to hold off on, or should I tell Paul and Rick, or do we just tell Mark and Garrett, or how are we gonna spread the information throughout the organization without undermining ourselves? The biggest problem as a team that we have right now is also a very strong asset of ours, which is that we all have been working remotely and mobily and for well over a decade. All of us have been. So that's a great thing for us to be able to be that versatile and not have to have an office and be a very virtual company. The bad part about that is that not all of us have met in the same room at once. And what I'm really looking forward to is Garrett coming in from Seattle and Paul coming in from Hanover, New Hampshire, to meet with Rick and Mark and I, and sit around and talk about everything other than ISEN and just bond, and then we can get back to ISEN when we're back online, but to just be able to get together and to shoot some pool or have a few beers or to sit on my front porch and talk about war stories about information technology. I think periodic face-to-face interaction is very important, ultimately important, because it humanizes the person you're working with. I mean, if it's just a voice or a style of writing an email, or a signature file, then that's not enough personality. I think that in order for people to work together, they need to come together, and just the basic knowledge management bait that everybody talks about is food and being able to eat together, break bread together, and get together as fellows and enjoy each other's company, and that'll carry on to working online. Well, I think in the most ideal and very realistic way, the kind of logistical operations that could be understood through a database of databases would be sustainable distribution of resources in a rapidly changing climate. The great thing about the kind of net-centric idea coming out of intelligence and military work is this very decentralized, very mobile way of delivering information that is actionable and very precise. If we have either a single incident of an environmental catastrophe, or we're looking at a systemic environmental change, then systems are going to have to learn to adapt on local levels, or as well as globally. And the word I use for that is glocal. You've got to act locally, think globally, but you also have to think globally and act locally. Or I think I just said that. It's vice versa. I think that this systemic approach of saying what best practices are working for water quality, potable water quality projects in Vietnam might soon be needed in Kansas, or Texas, or in New Orleans, or somewhere in the domestic continental U.S. That kind of information needs to be shared for emergency preparedness and for homeland security. Not just for the United States, but for the world. As a postscript, I'd like to talk about one of our mottos, which is all your databases belong to you. It's based on a very powerful, one of the most viral internet videos ever, called All Your Base Are Belong to Us, a very menacing Japanese video game that was badly translated. That all your bases belong to us. And there's this very scary idea of all the databases on the planet being made aware and connected to everyone. What has to be respected is that only databases that are volunteered to ISEN would be part of ISEN publicly. And if you were to use ISEN on an enterprise level, you could secure permissions easily to make sure that only select audiences got to the databases you want to get them to. So the idea of all your databases belong to you is that we're not actually tapping your data. We're just describing the database. So, and what's in it. And you can represent that however you would like, within reason, because the librarian's going to make sure that it's not misrepresenting yourself. It's going to be more accurately represented, so more easily be found. But all your databases belong to you also means that all the databases that are publicly available would be available to you to pick and choose your own personal library of databases. So, in a sense, all your databases belong to you is that if you find 100 or 1,000 databases out of 10 million databases that are relevant to you, you'd be able to manage that collection, and then you'd also be able to share it if you'd like. Now, if that database of databases has some value, you may be able to sell it to someone, to sell your personal library. But so you'd have a public library of your own that you'd share with people, and then you have your own private library that that you may want to just keep to yourself, or to sell as a, this is a good collection of databases for a real estate agent in Indiana. Then you've got 500 real estate agents in Indiana that would pay you $50 for that library, if you could market it, and we would help you do that. So, all your databases belong to you, and connect your mind with the body of knowledge.